Welcome to the Running Coaches Connection podcast, presented by MITCA, Michigan Interscholastic Track Coaches Association. I'm Takashi Gould, and joined by Rolando Eccleston and Carl Spina. As we return here from a brief sabbatical, commonly known as the holiday season, so we want to welcome everyone back. And today we're beyond excited for our guest, who will be also a clinic speaker at this upcoming MITCA Track and Field Clinic on February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the Causeway Bay Hotel in Lansing. He was the jumps and multi-events coach at LSU for many years, having coached 19 NCAA Champions, over 50 All-Americans, as well as having been a part of 12 NCAA team titles and a pair of JUCO team titles from his days at Blinn College. And if those aren't feathers in his cap, he's had 11 Olympians, as well as been a staff member on Team USA for World Championships and the Olympic Games. We'd like to welcome and thank Schexnayder for joining us today.
Very happy to be here.
We're beyond excited. Dave's not with us today, unfortunately, but Dave is going to be our MITCA president, and he was, I think, the one in charge of finding all the speakers and the presenters for the upcoming clinic. And man, when we heard from him that he got you on board, it was pretty awesome. We were all excited.
So glad. Thanks very much. So Coach, we'll have a good time here today. Dave's going to miss it, so too bad.
So, Coach, talking about our MITCA clinic coming up that you're presenting at, I know you're going to be speaking about speed development for all events, plyometrics, and the long jump. Can you give us a little bit more detail about what you're going to be presenting on?
Yeah, the speed development talk is going to kind of give the nuts and bolts of speed development. A lot of people think that speed development is a deep, dark thing. It's actually about doing a few things really well. Speed development is not as sexy as people tend to think. It's a tedious process of making really wise decisions every day. And what I'm going to do is kind of look at the process, the rules you kind of have to follow in order to be effective there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual workouts and how they should be administered, which is actually more important. And more importantly, I think I'm going to talk about the interference. A lot of times we plan our speed development well, but we do other things elsewhere in the program that actually don't allow the speed development we do to take root as it should. So we're also going to talk about interference that can come from other parts of the program and how to best integrate it into your program. The plyometric talk, we're going to talk about classifications first of all. Whenever people talk to me about plyometrics, the first thing that comes to my mind is always purposefulness, meaning that every type of plyometric you do has a certain type or a certain purpose or a certain role in the program. And if you understand the role that each type of plyometric plays, you can be a lot more skilled and get a lot more bang for your buck for the time you spend on it. So we're going to look at the categories, and we're going to look at the purposes of each, and then we're going to also take a look at the actual administration, sets, reps, how much is too much, how much is too little, that type of thing. And the long jump talk is going to be more of a teaching talk. You can go anywhere and get the technique of the long jump, and I'll do a little bit of that. But more importantly, what I'm going to do in the long jump talk is actually take you through the teaching process. Fortunately, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I kind of have a sequence in which that I use to introduce each skill that's involved in a long jump. I kind of know what exercises and what drills are the best to implement those, and I'm just going to share that system with people so that they can get their long jumpers functioning pretty good in a pretty short period of time. I know high school scenarios, you don't have a lot of time and a lot of preseason, and getting kids up and running and technically sound really quick is important. So we're going to focus really on the teaching end, and I think the attendees will go home with a really sound teaching progression that they can use at home.
Great. So that Saturday talk about the long jump is pretty narrowly focused, it sounds like, but the other ones are useful for me as a distance coach, a sprint coach, everyone, correct?
Yeah, they'll help any event, even the distance events. Long jump progression is pretty narrow focus on the jumps, but there's a ton of high jump stuff and triple jump stuff and even some pole vault stuff in there that you can take from it, because the way I teach penultimate step, the way I teach the takeoff step, the way I teach displacement, swinging mechanics, that's involved in all the jumps. And that basic long jump teaching progression that I'll be taking coaches through in that session is the same one that I actually use for all the other jumping events as well. The only difference is that after they learn that progression, then I take them off into other areas that are most specific to those events.
All right, good. So it's more broad even than I imagined.
Well, I think everything needs to be broad. You know, one thing I've learned, this is, I think, my 36th year of coaching, and the more I coach, the more I learn that the events aren't as different as we think. They're actually more the same. You know, when I first got started coaching, if I was coaching 17 events, I had 17 different workouts. Not the case anymore. You know, now I have a basic plan that kind of pertains to all of the speed power events. You know, pretty much everybody's working on a very similar program with the exception of the distance kids. And I tweak it, meaning that certain units will be done a little differently, or there'll be certain units that will be interjected for certain events. I really think that's the key to coaching, period. I used to think it was the key to coaching at the high school level because you don't have big staffs and you're trying to coach lots of kids in different events, but genuinely it's the key to coaching at any level because the more common ground you can find, the more commonalities you can identify, the better off you're eventually going to be in the teaching that you have, in the teaching that you have to accomplish. So I think all good programs identify the overlap, and they spend most of their time training the overlap with selected opportunities to train the unique things that pertain to each event.
Got it. Great answer. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, that was deep. I think my head just exploded.
Well, I don't want to do that, but you know, it is critical when you're coaching at any level. I mean, here in America, none of us are coaching like 2 athletes or 3 athletes. So
right.
Being able to address things in common formats is important.
Oh yeah, I think it's a brilliant approach. And so, you know, you mentioned that you've been coaching for 36 years now, and you also kind of touched on the high school level and the college level. What was your early background in the sport, not just as a coach, but even as an athlete? Like, what lit the fire for you in track and field? What got you going?
Well, I really wasn't much of a track and field athlete. You know, I was much more of a football player, and football was my best sport, I guess you'd say. But I don't know, I remember my freshman year, I wasn't out for track, and our high school team won the regional championship, and that kind of interested me a little bit. So the next year I went out, and we really didn't have, you know, I'm not being critical to the coaches at all. I hope, you know, it really wasn't a program where they teach you events and that type of thing. It was more about get people out and that type of thing. And, you know, I did the throws. I did a couple of other events. They put a javelin in my hand and told me, hey, if you do this every day, you'll be pretty good. And so I practiced it every day, and I ended up being pretty decent at it. But that was kind of the end of my athletic career in track. When I started coaching at the high school level, not many people know that I spent 11 years coaching at the high school level before I got to the collegiate level. So that's kind of my first love. But anyhow, when I got coaching at the high school level, not long after that, I was primarily a football coach, but I liked track, and I wanted to do something in the spring. You know, you're young and got energy, and you're not married, and you want to do things. So I started coaching track too, and I'm just the kind of person that if I'm going to coach it, I'm going to do it as well as I can. I knew that I was a darn good football coach. You know, I was a defensive coordinator and pretty successful, and I just felt like I don't think I'm coaching track with the same level of sophistication that I'm coaching football. And that's what kind of lit my fire to learn as much as I can about it and seek mentors and that type of thing.
Wow, that's a great background. I'm very similar to mine. I was a football guy for a very long time, so I can definitely appreciate the approach.
Love the game. Yeah, I still love the game. What's interesting is I kept getting offers to coach small-time high school football and small-time college football at small universities. And I wasn't really interested. And what's funny is a bad principal comes along, and the next college job that called me was a track and field job, and that's how I ended up in high-level track, actually.
Wow.
So it was more of an accident than anything. You know, when I think of the experiences in track and field, you know, I think back about how lucky I was that happened. And when I look at the paychecks in track and field, I wonder if it wasn't all a big mistake, but we'll never know.
I know that's right.
Hashtag too real.
Yeah.
But seriously, I have no regrets. That's just joking.
Oh, yeah. You know, something I found very interesting that you just said when you're talking about the football background, because it resonated with me because that's something that I did a lot, too. Is that you said that you weren't approaching track with that same attention to detail that you were in football, and I just find that interesting because it was kind of the same thing for me. I was an offensive coordinator, and so you know, it definitely got to a point where I completely feel that statement. Like, yeah, I had to get a little bit more detail with the track because I don't know, it's very similar background because I don't coach football anymore. I've taken up cross country, and I've been sold on running ever since. I'm just hooked on it, and so I can definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I just kept thinking if football is this hard, track can't be this easy, and that's when I just kind of delved into it, you know, and started searching mentors and went through the whole process that kind of got me started to where I am, I guess.
So, Boo, as like you were talking about being a high school coach for a number of years, and you said you taught as well?
Yes, I did. I was a math teacher.
All right. So is that about when, I know you kind of touched on this briefly, but like you realized that this sport was going to be such an important aspect within your life?
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, you know, when I was coaching in college, we'd get officials who would come out, you know, to work for the first time. You know, guys would come out to work to meet. So I always tell them, I said, there's very little difference between track and crack. You know, track is highly addictive, and it is. And I just kind of fell in love with the sport. I was very passionate about it. I'm just the kind of person that when I feel something, I just throw myself into it 100%, and that's what it was. So that's kind of what I did. You know, I just found it interesting. I found it challenging. My nature is I'm a kind of a problem solver. I'm a builder. I like building things. You know, I built a house. I'm a builder by nature. And the idea of building an athlete or building a program was something that was very appealing to me, and I could see that in track and field. You know, the idea of developing someone. And that, I think, was what I liked the most. It gave me an opportunity to be myself, to be a builder, to be a person who could actually exercise some vision and see what something could be, and then work toward that goal over time. So, and that's, I guess, what really attracted me to it more than anything else.
That's awesome. That's really neat to hear, and certainly, like you said, the timing of how you transitioned out into the collegiate world, and then, you know, obviously that led to who you are now. If it wasn't for some of those stars aligning, as we look back on, you know, we'd all be missing out on something here in the track and field world.
You know,
it's pretty unique.
One thing I'd like to add is I wouldn't change a thing as far as my background, because the time I spent teaching in the classroom, I really started to realize that teaching and coaching are one and the same. And, you know, the only difference in coaching, the stuff you're teaching is a little more fun to most people. But I realized that coaching was teaching. I started to understand that being a better teacher would help me in coaching. And I also kind of started understanding how football helped me in track. You know, the fact that in football, team culture is a huge thing. And at the collegiate level, many programs suffer. I think the single biggest thing that a lot of track coaches at the collegiate level don't get is the whole team culture aspect of it. And I was fortunate to come from another sport where team culture is critical. So I always taught the track kids, coached the track athletes with a little bit different mindset, trying to develop a solid group culture where the athletes fed off of each other, where the athletes leaned on each other, where the athletes helped each other through tough spots. I wanted my athletes to bond with each other for a purpose, you know, the purpose of winning, the purpose of, I wanted to, and all that resulted in very positive peer pressure. So one of the reasons I think I was really successful as a collegiate coach was that discipline was something I never had to do. Just because I was able to set up a good team culture and tremendous positive peer pressure existed in my training group, that was all kind of taken care of for me, and I didn't learn that in track. I learned that in football. So in short, I wouldn't change my background at all. I mean, I think that the teaching and the multi-sport experience were extremely important in making me as effective as I am. You know, you can always learn the events, but I really think that those other areas are where you learn how to handle the athletes themselves.
That's pretty cool. It's interesting how the conversation about culture is becoming more important in coaching. I also like how you took us from track is crack all the way to teaching. That was impressive, Coach. I'm really glad that
can we quote you on that? Track is like crack. ...
Yeah, track and crack, they're very similar. Just one is legal and one's not. They're very highly addicted. No question about it. If you like copyrighted, feel free.
I wonder which one of those is going to show up on the back of a T-shirt first. Track and crack, coaching is teaching. A lot of times, we really like to look back and, as a group of friends, talk about problems we're struggling with or mistakes we've made. So, Coach, we were wondering, if you look back on your career, what's a mistake that you made that you wish you had an opportunity to do over? I know you just talked about you wouldn't change anything, but just looking at mistakes you've made that you wish you could change the outcome or what you did or how you responded.
Unquestionably, it would be to trust myself more in certain situations. When I first got started in coaching, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was just getting every kid that looked like they could do something. I was pulling them out of the hallway and getting them out there and doing things, And at the same time, I was looking for mentors and trying to learn things and such. But I was also studying, and I also had common sense, and I also had an innate understanding of a few things. And early in my career, there were some things I did, and I didn't do them because they made sense to me. I did them because people told me I should, or they were the norm, or they were what everybody else does. And I was kind of afraid to go out on a limb, so to speak. And they set me back. There were a few athletes I had that actually went backwards on other people's advice. And I took other people's advice just because they'd been coaching longer or because they had a few better athletes or whatever. And I really should have trusted myself more. I'm not saying that mentorship isn't important. I'm not saying that by any means. Mentorship has gotten me where I am today more than anything else. But it needs to be critical mentorship, meaning when things don't resonate with you and you kind of have a background in sports science and when you kind of have a background in these other areas and it just doesn't make sense, maybe it's best not to follow that person's advice and kind of trust your own intuition. In my early years of coaching, I wish I had trusted my intuition a little more. I think I could have helped some athletes a little bit more, and maybe I'd have been a few years along on my progression curve just a little bit faster, a little quicker. That would be all.
That's great. I like that part that you started with. I did it because it made sense to others, but not to me. That was interesting. I like that. Thank you, Coach.
Well, again, like I said, the mistakes I have, I don't regret because they were a learning process as well. Mistakes are only mistakes if you don't ever learn anything from them. And so it's really hard for me to find a lot of regrets because in most instances, I think I've learned more from the mistakes than from the successes, quite frankly.
Yeah, those are always great learning tools. I know like Carl mentioned, we always, the four of us always get together and we're always talking about what we need to do and how can we handle this situation and what mistakes we've made and how we can improve on that. So this is good reaffirmation that we're on the right path here. So what made you transition? You said you started out as a high school coach for 11 years, and then how did you go from there to the high school, or from the high school level to the college level? And then what made you decide to make the move from LSU over to the SAC company that you have now?
Well, I'll tell you the story. Well, first of all, it was pure accident that I got into collegiate track and field coaching. Like I said, I was fielding good high school track teams, and I had a principal that I really didn't care working for. I got a phone call offering me a junior college job, and I went. So that was it, basically. But as far as transferring from LSU to what I'm doing now, I got to a situation at LSU where I really wasn't enjoying it quite as much. The leadership of the program had changed, and I wasn't really enjoying it quite as much as I was, to be honest with you, and I found it was actually a little difficult, and the team culture had changed in a way that I found it was a little more difficult to develop the athletes I wanted to develop. So I decided to retire. One of the reasons I stayed at LSU all of those years was because I had high school coaching years in Louisiana, and in LSU I was in the same retirement system. So very few people know that, but my main job now is retired public school teacher. So what I did was I had the years to retire, and I decided that I was going to retire, plus the fact that I really wasn't making a ton of money at LSU. The ability to retire and then double dip, get paid and get a retirement check was attractive as well. Trying to look ahead to my financial stability. After all, I didn't want to eat cat food as a retiree. So I had to start kind of thinking about that stuff. I'd made a lot of sacrifices early, and I needed to kind of make up for them. So anyway, that's what I decided to do. And just by chance, there was a training business in Baton Rouge that wanted me to run their business for them. I didn't own the center. They just wanted me to operate the center for them. And anyhow, so I decided to do that. So I went out, and even though that center really wasn't what I wanted to do long term, I thought it was a nice, exit. So I exited, and once I exited, I started getting calls, just people calling me like, hey, Coach, why don't you take a few days? We'll give you some dollars, and you come watch us practice for a few days and see if we're doing things right, So I started getting these kinds of calls. I get calls like, hey, why don't you come to the Michigan clinic and speak, because you're always busy with LSU. Now that you're done at LSU, why don't you come do this? So I started getting these calls, and the calls kind of just developed into an income stream, and that would supplement my retirement and help me get ahead a little bit. And that's how it all kind of started. So I kind of fell into it, to be very honest with you. So when young coaches ask me now, how did I get to where you are, I never had a plan. I never had a career path plotted out. I just always tried to develop the best athletes I could and do the best job I could and do things as well as I could. And I've just learned that if you just do that and succeed, then people notice and doors open for you. So, just do your job, shut up, and good things tend to happen in coaching, and that's what happened to me. So where I am now was never where I planned. It's just where hard work and a little bit of good fortune and has taken me, I guess. So that's how I got to what I'm doing now. Just like I said, I just kind of fell into it. It was just a natural continuation of what I was doing.
It's really interesting because you talk about, actually there's a lot of good quotes in there already. I was kind of joking about it. I love it. Shut up and do your job and good things will happen to you. And then, like you said, you're just kind of focusing on the now rather than hoping for trajectories of X, Y, and Z and 5-year, 10-year plans. It's, take care of home and what's happening.
The other interesting thing, just not to interrupt you for a second, but the other interesting thing is that my two most positive career changes have both come from negative. So you just don't know. So many times, when you're in your career, you hit a fork in the road, and you don't know if to take the left or the right, and we always worry, which is the right choice. Well, chances are they're both the right choice. We always think, we see a fork in the road in our careers, and we think one's right and one's wrong. Well, if you're working, they'll probably both be right. It's they'll be different, but they'll probably both be right. So just don't worry about it.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. The more we hear from you, the better. Obviously, that's why we're all asking about you. So then, kind of playing off of that, what motivated you from there to get involved with coaching education? Obviously, you got the clinic stuff where these coaches associations are reaching out to you to come out for a weekend, but I know that you're more involved with, or you have been with USATF, and now with the academy that USTF CCCA has. How did you get into those roles?
It's very simple. I was asked. I never thought that I really was special and had a ton to share and bullied my way into the program or anything. I was just asked. Dan asked me, says, we really need somebody strong to teach these courses. So I said, well, Dan, if you've done a lot for me, if you think I can help, I'll do it. So I was just asked, and that's really what it was. So quite often that's the whole deal, and so I was just asked. And I got good receptions, and I guess when you do a good job, people ask you to do more. I mean, that's what we do with good horses, right? We ride them more often. And it turned out that I had some administrative skills, so I started, being a contributor on the administrative side of coaching education programs and things like that. And so once again, it was never something I really thought that I would want to do or whatever. I asked. They asked me to do it and asked me to speak at clinics or whatever, and I did it. And I guess I've been decent fairly good at it, so I keep getting asked back again. So that's all it really was being asked, you know. And that's an interesting thing. This will be a controversial statement, but, you know, I run 2 coaching education programs, as you know, and what is so interesting is you know, it's not just me teaching. I bring in lots of other people to instruct in the program. And what's really interesting is that every bad instructor I ever had was someone who asked me for the opportunity. And every great instructor I ever had was someone that I had to literally ask or beg to do it. So it's something about the good coaches that they're more into what they're doing as opposed to more interested in displaying what they're doing. They're more into what they do on a day-to-day basis than they have an interest in actually being stuck in a display window somewhere or having an opportunity to preach about the things that they've done. So I thought that might be a unique observation that young coaches might want to take heart in. You know, that if you just do your job, those kind of opportunities will come to you. If you seek those kind of opportunities and neglect your job, well, you might get on a clinic day somewhere, but it's not going to last very long.
No, that's a great line there. And we appreciate it. It's kind of this take care of home base. Like you said, do your job, keep your head where your butt is, so to speak. Don't keep your eyes wandering around all over the place and just focus on the kids you have and the program that you have and the staff that you have. Good things will come.
The grass is always greener. You know, I think Thomas Jefferson said all men are created equal. You know, well, maybe they are, but after that, nothing's equal anymore. You know, there's always going to be a program that's going to have a little better athlete or a little better facilities or better budget, whatever. And if you spend all your time worrying about that stuff, then or using it as an excuse, then you're just not going to get anywhere. You know, so nobody ever promises anybody that anything is going to be fair, and that's one of my pet peeves is when people, you know, do things like that. You know, I tell this to young people all the time. The 2 least productive human activities are rationalization and self-pity. And you have to constantly be on guard as a human being, as a coach, not to fall into those 2 traps of rationalizing things and self-pity. If you rationalize, then you never, ever are fair in evaluating yourself, and you're never critical enough of yourself to enable you to truly progress. You know, you're not going to get better unless you're self-critical. You know, I didn't go bald just by, you know, thinking I was correct all the time. I went bald by really worrying whether I was doing the right things and really stressing over, you know, whether I could be doing things better. You know, so rationalization is just a shortcut to failure. It builds your ego up, but it doesn't do anything as far as increasing your level of competence. And then self-pity. You know, when you feel sorry for yourself, then you just short-circuited everything. You know, you have no, to find excuses not to do something, you know, is incredible. When people come and tell me that I don't have a track or I don't have this or I don't have that, I always talk to them about the Jamaicans. You know, when you look at, we all are familiar with how great a country the Jamaicans are in track and field. You know, and I've been to many countries. And I go to these countries, and these countries don't have many very good athletes. And when you go to these countries, they say, well, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have the weights, we don't have all these facilities, and they have a litany of reasons why. But then when you go to Jamaica, none of that matters. Like they're running kids out on grass barefoot, they're running up and down hills, they're throwing rocks around, whatever. I mean, they're just finding a way, you know. So the whole idea of finding a way to do something rather than an excuse why you can't do something is an important thing. And it's just a different attitude in that country. You know, the same bloodlines yet you have in other countries of the world, but they're much more successful because of that can-do attitude and no excuses type of attitude they have there. So in short, I just try to, I've learned lessons from that, and I try to point that out to young coaches, you know, to take advantage of what you have, because everybody has something. Even if it's just you wanting to work, you always have some advantages.
Oh, it was really good, Coach. Thank you. That's great info. Even after coaching like 15 years, and I just learned a lot in the last 5 years that I have in a couple of years. So thank you very much.
It never learned and never stops.
I'm kind of curious, kind of switching gears a little bit. What are you reading right now in terms of like good resources for coaches, knowledge base, whether it's science based or just working with people? And what is it you're reading right now?
Well, honestly, over the last 5 or 6 years or so, my taste in reading have changed, and I finally drifted away from a lot of science stuff. When I was younger, I read all the track and field books, and they were helpful. There comes a time in your career when you need to pull from outside of your own field. All professional fields become somewhat inbred. Track coaches only listen to other track coaches. Lawyers only listen to other lawyers and so forth. So you get a very tunnel view approach of things. And in the middle part of my career, I made a concerted effort to go outside of the track and field book and start looking at medical texts and physical therapy texts and biomechanic reports and all of the things that were a little bit peripheral. I wanted to look at what other sports were doing, which is why I kind of delved into the NFL player development kind of things and those types. I wanted to see what other sports were doing. And that was extremely valuable to me. Now most of my interests lie in the humanistic side of coaching. So most of what I like to read now is actually things that you might not consider to be coaching related. I like to read a lot of psychology. I like to read a lot of history. What's the old saying that, if you don't learn your lessons, you're doomed to repeat them? Because I'm a strong believer in evolutionary psychology, and I think that field has a lot of the answers for why we do things with athletes, why we can expect humans and athletes to behave certain ways, why some kids compete better than others, and that type of thing. So that's kind of what I'm into now. I read a lot of things that I try to be as diverse as I possibly can, but I really don't keep my finger on the pulse quite as much of the actual track and field technical stuff as much as I used to. Now, being in it for a long time, I still read it because what I typically have now is mentorees. I've helped lots of coaches over the years, and they're kind of mentorees, I guess you would say. And not a week goes by where they don't send me a couple of articles that are technical in nature, but we think you'd like this, and I'll take the time to read them. But I kind of let them be my guide. I kind of let them steer me, and I kind of enjoy looking at those things. But when it comes for actual things to read myself, I kind of get outside of the track and field world nowadays.
If you don't mind me jumping in, what books are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading a book. Reading a book called Rising Tide. Rising Tide is actually the history of the 1927 flood of the Mississippi River, which was a very tumultuous event in those days that set in motion a lot of the political changes, social changes, setbacks in racial relations and things like that happened in 1927, and also has a lot to do with some of the geological problems that our state is undergoing. It's a tremendous study in how short-sighted government interference in things that you really don't understand can have very long-lasting negative effects.
That's neat because, like you said, you're touching on a bunch of different things, and aside from coaching, but like you're saying, it's also helping you as a well-rounded coach as you're learning different things, and clearly that's something that for you it hits more of home of where you live and in your state and your region.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. One of my key mentors, maybe my most important mentor, was quite a student of European history. And I asked him why one time, and I got an answer kind of pretty similar to the one that I just gave you. And that just always resonated with me, not to be tunnel vision and just try to be as broad as you possibly can. After all, if you're gonna climb a mountain or jump high, you need a wide base of your parabola. So ultimately, the more fields that you're versed in and have understanding in, the more effective you're eventually going to be in the field you choose. We always know as track and field coaches, sometimes we're a little selfish, but we really do understand that if kids have diverse athletic environments, they typically end up being better at the sport they eventually choose. Well, if coaching track is the vocation we eventually choose, well, the best way to get there is to be as diverse as you possibly can in your understanding and in your background and in the education that you have.
Mm. So with all this experience and knowledge that you've gotten over the years, I'm curious, What do you think we can do to grow the sport of track and field? I mean, within our circle, we all love it. You know, everybody who's a track coach, every coach that I've met is obsessed with the sport, but we still can't quite get over that hump and into the mainstream, just even on a professional level, all the way down to, you know, the high school level. I know something I'm always dealing with is kids trying to specialize. But they just want to focus on one thing, like you just touched on, and they're not really being diverse athletes. So, in your opinion, what can we do, or how can we grow the sport on all levels?
Well, first of all, I think that every coach has a role to put the sport before their program. And I think that many of us fall short in that regard. You know, I've been in hundreds and hundreds of the so-called political meetings, you know, meetings of the State High School Track Coaches Association or meetings of the NCAA Track Coaches Association and those types of organizations. And it's so easy to identify who has agendas and why some programs and some coaches are trying to manipulate variables and manipulate the political process for things that are obviously going to benefit their own particular programs, or at certain times enable them to define success in a way that will make them successful. So in short, I really think you got to put your program first, and I just don't think we do enough of that. You know, just because your kid didn't qualify for state doesn't mean that the qualification system for state necessarily needs to change. You know, or if it does, it may need to be changed, but you can't let your personal prejudices enter into those types of things. And I think that, quite frankly, we often do that. Now, I excuse young coaches because when you're a young coach, you're kind of scared and you're afraid if you're going to be successful. So I kind of understand that. But if you're an older coach who has a veteran status, and you feel that way, well, shame on you. Shame on you. You know, once you're established in the sport, there really is no reason. You know, if we can actually put the sport first and do things, again, that provide more recognition to the sport and to the athletes in the sport, then it becomes better for all of us. You know, you mentioned specialization of kids. Well, specialization isn't killing us, because if specialization is not necessarily a good thing, don't get me wrong, but kids could specialize in track and field, but it's not happening. And the reason why is not specialization that's killing you, it's what we do that's killing us. So in short, I just think we have to be a lot less selfish. You know, if we genuinely put the sport first, well, then the pie gets bigger, and then everybody gets the biggest piece of the pie. But going back to what I was saying earlier, if you're only worried about the school in your district that has better facilities, or the other schools that have a little more talent or whatever, and you're looking for ways to pull them down rather than raise yourself, well, then we never get anywhere. Track and field is by far the most democratic sport of all. You know, most sports, the coaches don't have nearly as much say-so in the way things are done, the way the sport is projected, the way the sport is done. You look at sports at the professional level. There's a commissioner, boom, bang, end of story. You know, that's it. Track and field, have USA Track and Field that probably has 500 volunteer offices in it, and everybody votes. So it's a much more democratic process. And because of the fact that it's a democratic process, we have the strength of more diverse views. But we also have the baggage of not being able to reach a consensus. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. We have to be able to buy into a common vision and understand. We need to put trust in someone and accept that person's strength and deal with the fact that we might disagree with them from time to time. So, in short, that's what I feel. I feel that our greatest, and you know, the old Chinese philosophy, your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So the fact that we're so democratic in track and field allows us to be diverse and have things like dual meets, but also mega invitationals like Penn Relay. So we see all of these different different displays of the sport in different manners. But it's also our biggest weakness, in that it does not allow us to speak with a single voice or to reach consensus easily when we need to make changes.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the potential of a professional track and field circuit or league, if you will, in this country?
Well, the sport cannot operate here in this country, you know, professionally without a fan base, without a vision, and people just do not see enough track and field anymore. When I watch ESPN, and now I see poker, now I see tractor pulls, now you see all this kind of stuff. I see CrossFit competitions, and it just breaks my heart. Like, here's something else that's on TV that's been prioritized ahead of track and field. And shame on us for not being able to reach a consensus where we can put track in the public eye. We can set a professional league and we can find sponsors, but those sponsors are not going to sign on over and over again and keep this going if we can't create a viewership. So again, it's all about creating a viewership, creating an interest level in the sport. That has to be a prerequisite. So going back to what I was saying before, track and field's viewership and has just eroded over the course of time. In many schools, it's gone from being a key sport where competitiveness is really valued to more of a participation sport. I know a lot of cross-country, I hate not to bash these people, but I know lots of cross-country programs in high school that have 70 or 80 kids out for cross-country. I guess that's good, but were we not better off when there were like 8 kids in the cross-country team and they were all really good and we were fighting to win a trophy rather than, investing a lot of time? So I'm not to be, but I just want to be the devil's advocate. There's another way of looking at that, When I was coaching in the high school level, I didn't have 100 kids on my track team. I didn't really care to have 100 kids on my track team. I wanted to have the 20 best boy athletes in the school and the 20 best girl athletes in the school out for it and get them into the events that I needed that I could compete at a higher level. So I think that we've done some of this to ourselves by just taking track and making it look like something that's more like intramurals than it is an actual competitive sport where we really value things and we really value the trophy as much as we do in some of these other sports as well. So in short, So, and again, getting back to what I'm saying, how do we define success? I think that we keep a lot of weak track and field coaches around because they have 100 kids out for track. Well, okay, but if you're never winning a trophy or never competitive, is that good? That coach can go to their AD, and that coach can say, oh, we have 100 kids out for track. Isn't that wonderful? Well, yeah, okay, in one way. But is that really what varsity sports should be about? Varsity sports should be about aspiring to compete at high levels. So in short, sometimes I think that, our own soft-heartedness and the fact that track and field is a sport where everybody can contribute in some ways might be part of our downfall, where we kind of dumb it down to some extent and we forget that it really is, and athletics always is, about those who can, not about those who can't. And that might sound mean, but the world of athletics is very Darwinian, and nobody's feeling sorry for the football coach who, comes out last. That coach gets fired. And to this day, I always maintain, as cruel as it may sound, that track and field would be a much better sport if losing coaches got fired on a regular basis like they do in other sports.
Coach, if I can hop in there really quickly, I want to ask you a quick question about the idea of consensus points that you've been discussing. Can you articulate some things that we could all rally around, or we should all rally around as coaches, that would really help the sport?
Well, I think, at the high school level, the sport is tremendously healthier than it is at the collegiate level, and at the collegiate level in our country, it's healthier than it is at the professional level, in my opinion. I know that national governing bodies will point out how many medals we win in the Olympics. That has nothing to do with anything regarding visibility of the sport. All that means is that people pay attention every 4 years. When I remember when I was a youngster, you would see track and field on Wide World of Sports throughout the spring. It was a very common thing that you would see. So in short, I think that at those levels, we have to go back and understand or define what track and field really is. The team concept has really been destroyed to a large extent because the NCAA has rolled back scholarship opportunities. We don't have enough scholarships anymore to run the scored meets that used to be the heartbeat of track and field. A lot of coaches these days don't like scored meets because then there's a winner and a loser, and you can't define success the way that you want to. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier. So I think the whole idea of establishing a team culture, and scoring meets and defining winners and losers is what we need to be about. I think the fact that at the highest levels of collegiate track and field, there's so much about elite competition and chasing marks to qualify for the nationals that it's been more mark-driven than it is competition-driven, and that's bad. I was genuinely hoping that when the NCAA went to a regional format, that would stop, that we wouldn't have to worry about it, that we know that the best athletes are going to get to nationals, so now we can worry about team competitions and worry about national competitions later. That hasn't been the choice. That hasn't been the result. What's happened as a result is that now the mark chasing has just extended down to a lower level. So in short, we need to define our system and define our system in a way that creates interest by once again putting interest back in the team concept. You know, I use this all the time. You know, many track and field programs, they'll send the discus throwers out to San Diego this week, and the distance runners will go to Stanford, and the sprinters will go in the south for some warm weather meet. And we call that track and field, and that's how you operate your program. And don't get me wrong, I understand why you do that. It's because of the way the system is set up. But when Auburn and Alabama play football, you would never hear Auburn say, well, we're going to take our offense down the road to Georgia because their defense is weaker this week. And Alabama's going to bring their offense, you know, down to LSU, you know, to LSU because their defense kind of sucks, and we can get a good scrimmage in there and get some good numbers. You know, that doesn't happen in those situations. You know, you're never going to hear the Auburn coach say, well, we had a game with Alabama this week, but we're canceling it because our sprinter got hurt, so we're just not going to bring our sprint relay this week. You know, but we do this kind of crap in track and field all the time. All the time we do it, you know, and we just don't own up to the weaknesses in our programs, and we look for ways to define success on our terms. That has to stop. It has to stop, you know. So again, you know, defining what track and field is and defining success and failure and being willing to deal with the consequences is what we have to do in order to do those types of things, you know.
Coach, I'm really glad you hit that topic, that nail right on the head. One of the biggest pet peeves, now this is kind of looking through the similar scope, but through the lens of a distance coach in cross country particularly, is kids talking about 5K PRs, 3-mile PRs, and the whole point of cross country is at the root it's same thing. It's running. It's getting from point A to point B. It's competition. And these kids are talking about, yeah, well, I ran this time. Yeah, and you were 185th at the Invitational. You know what I mean? And then this other kid over here across the country has a similar time, but, you know, whatever. He may have been doing something else. So.
Well, if you were 185th, but you were 285th last week, well, okay, let's be proud. But ultimately, yeah, it's got to be about competition. You know, ultimately it does. And it's nice that we can compete against ourselves because in track and field we have PRs. It's one of the nice things about our sport is that it's very measurable. But at the same time, yeah, ultimately it's about, you know, how many people do we beat on this day, you know. So many kids win a meet and brand themselves a failure because they didn't qualify or they didn't run this time or that time. And ultimately it needs to be about winning and losing, you know. One of the most disturbing things I ever saw in my life was I went to a meet. I won't say the school, but I saw a very high-level athlete, extremely high-level athlete, rabbit for an athlete from another school. And I asked that coach why, and says, well, we're not all that cutthroat. But doesn't your athletic director expect the red to beat the white or the purple to beat the gold or the green to beat the blue or whatever? I mean, that's our problem, is that athletic directors and such don't understand us because we continually throw crossword puzzles and jigsaw puzzles at that as far as what we're actually doing. So ultimately we make it easy for them to say, well, I understand this sport. Let's just invest in it. And I think I've said enough about that.
Good stuff, Coach. Some people will be offended. Some people will agree. I really like your idea about how do we build consensus, or what ideas do we agree upon to help build the sport. And I think you hit on some really good ideas there.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I don't blame coaches because that's the system that's set up. You know, we have to have the courage to change the system. You know, any coach that does some of those things that I despise, I understand perfectly. because you're only doing what the system requires you to do. So I'm not pointing personal fingers at all, but shame on those coaches if they're not willing to invest in changing the system so that we don't have to do those kinds of things.
Oh, okay. I hear you, Coach. Takashi knows, because I talk to him all the time, it's one of my big pet peeves is these moral victories that we seem to have in our sport all the time. That just stresses me out, I mean, like you said, our sport is measurable, so there is a winner and there's a loser, and if you're just going to be about that little baby step moral victory all the time, then what are we doing?
Yeah, well, like I said, in every good sport, every sport that's in America's eye, coaches get fired for losing. That's something we should actually aspire to.
Yeah.
For other people, not for us, right?
Yeah, everybody else. Yeah, right.
Accountability. Who'd have thought?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what a novel concept.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're towards the end, but one of the things that I was wondering about, coaches, what recommendations would you have for coaches' education at the lower levels, like middle school and high school coaches? Like, what should we be reading? What should we be looking at? Who should we be listening to?
Like I said, I try to be as diverse as I possibly can, and that's what I advise. So I tell them to do anything they can find. Any clinic that you can find, get to it. I know when I was a young coach, I spent tons of my own dollars going to clinics and such. But I will say this: the coaching education programs. Of course, I'm preferential to the one that I run. But there are some coaching education programs, and they serve a big role. When I was a young coach, I went to a ton of clinics, and I really had a hard time coming to a consensus because clinics are about very diverse opinions. The coaching education programs, the USA Track and Field program and our program in the USTF CCCA, they're curricular in nature. So I also advise the coaches to get involved in a coaching education program because the coaching education programs are curricular in nature, and because of that, they kind of take these loose ends and tie them together. They kind of connect the dots a little better than clinic experiences do. But by no means would I pencil myself in only to that. I would try to create as many diverse opportunities as I can. And I also challenge coaches who are younger coaches to become diverse in lots of fields. You should be going to strength and conditioning clinics. You should be going to weightlifting clinics, to learn the techniques of weightlifting and things of that nature. So you should be going to sports medicine clinics so you start to have an understanding of how to manage hamstrings and shin splints and these types of things. So just grab as much as you can. Everything that's within reach and within your budget, go for it. Because I've never, ever felt like I wasted money on a professional development opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
Very deep, Coach. Very deep.
Yeah, wait a minute. How do you prevent shin splints and all kinds of issues like that? Since you're going to touch on that topic, and our lovely Michigan weather has us trapped indoors. We had rainstorms, snow, and hail all in the last 72 hours, and I believe we got some 55-degree days coming up around the corner. So we're trapped in the hallways.
Well, periodized by weather, guys.
Get the Farmer's Almanac.
I just hope that there's some salted down place with about 80 meters in a straight line that you can get something done.
We got something like it. Not quite 80 meters, but yeah.
Yeah, well, sad to say, unfortunately, weather does discriminate. I get asked a lot of times, Coach, how do you compensate for the cold weather? The answer is you don't. You do the best you can. And, if I ever came up with that answer, I wouldn't be, I'd be on the French Riviera sucking down retired if I had the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. But we all do the best we can. What's interesting, though, is that I've observed, not being critical or to any particular place, but it just seems like the worse the weather, the better the coaches are. No kidding. I've done a ton of clinics all over this country, and it just seems that in general, the worse the weather and the less the talent, the better the coaches are. So there's something about coaches in certain areas who are resourceful. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when you're out there fighting the snow and the ice, at least pat yourselves on the back for being as resourceful as you are, and understand that if you were in a nice warm place, you'd be kicking some serious butt.
Yeah, like goes back to what you were saying, finding a way, right?
Exactly. Find a way to do something. Exactly.
Well, gotta love Michigan winners, right?
So.
It's almost 80 here today.
Is it really?
Thanks for that one, Coach. Appreciate that.
I'll tell you, it's not a nice 80. It's a damp and muggy kind of 80, but you'd probably take it. We're actually just the opposite. We're actually dying for a little bit of cool stuff to kind of break the heat cycle here, but everybody's got their own problems.
Yeah. I know in Michigan it's the only place you can get all 4 seasons in 1 week.
Here you can get them all in one day. There was an old tugboat captain on the Mississippi River. He told me one time, he said, the hottest I've ever been in my life was in Louisiana. And he said the coldest I've been in my life was also in Louisiana. You know, you get those days where it's right at 32 and there's a fog and it's damp and humidity is at 100%. So, so anyway.
That's interesting.
It is what it is. Only good thing is that if you don't like the weather, it's likely to change soon. So.
Now, I don't know if you own a winter coat or not, but you want to make sure to pack one when you come up here to Michigan in a month here.
Oh, I'll be ready. Trust me, I'll be ready. I do a lot of work in Canada.
If you want to look like a real Midwesterner, layer up. You know, if you got like a jacket, a hoodie, a long sleeve, a short sleeve, you know, then you look like a real Midwesterner coming in. You might blow some mind.
I'm ready. I was in Des Moines a couple of weeks ago, and it hit 2 degrees there, and I've done a bunch of stuff in Canada. So I've done the 20 below and 25 below stuff. So I'm not saying that I really know how to deal with it. You know, I know we're off the topic a little bit now, but I'll never forget the first time I was in that stuff. I had a rental car. So anyway, I'm walking outside to get to my rental car, and I just can't wait until I get in the car because it's going to be warm in the car, right? Well, it's not. Like here in the South, if it's 20 outside, well, in the car it's like 50, you know, so you're okay once you get in the car. No, not up there, you know. So I was like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. But it's just a whole culture shock kind of thing, you know. I never really understood that the fluid in your nose froze at those temperatures either until I was there.
Yeah, you gotta love it. I know it was 30 degrees yesterday, and I went for a walk.
I'd actually take 30 degrees. Like I said, we could use a little bit of cold weather. So.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you for your time. This is wonderful. We appreciate it. You're a busy man with all your coaches' educations and clinic presentations. So thanks for getting us in.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. And like I said, if I can ever help you, let me know. Okay, looking forward to seeing you next week. Or in a couple of weeks, I should say.
Hey, thanks again, Coach. We appreciate it.
All right, see you guys. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Coach.